My wife looked at me on a rainy evening and said, "Maybe we became comfortable instead of passionate." I respected the truth, packed a suitcase for a project in Singapore, focused entirely on building something new, and months later curiosity brought her back. Maybe we became comfortable instead of passionate. She said it the way someone reads a line from a book they've already memorized. Calm, certain, like she had been sitting with that sentence for months before she finally let it out into the room. I didn't respond right away. I just stood there by the kitchen counter, holding a mug that had gone cold an hour ago, watching the rain hit the window in long diagonal streaks. The kind of rain that doesn't make noise. The kind that just falls quietly and covers everything. She was sitting at the dining table with both hands wrapped around her own mug, not looking at me, looking at nothing in particular. Her eyes were somewhere on the middle distance between us. That space where people stare when they're not actually looking at anything. They're just thinking so hard that the outside world becomes a blur. I set my mug down on the counter. The small ceramic click of it hitting the granite felt too loud for the room. "Where did that come from?" I asked, and she finally looked at me. Not with anger, not with tears, with something that scared me more than either of those. She looked at me with a kind of exhausted honesty. The look of someone who had finally decided to stop pretending. "It's been coming for a while," she said softly. I just didn't know how to say it. I was 36 years old. We had been married for 8 years. And in that single moment, on a rainy Tuesday evening in October, I felt the floor of the life I had built shift underneath me. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Her name was Claire. We met in our late 20s at a mutual friend's rooftop birthday party in the city. She was laughing at something someone said, and the sound of it cut straight through all the noise around us. I introduced myself badly. She laughed at that too. We were married 2 years later. We were, by every visible measure, a good couple. We had a 2-bedroom apartment that we'd spent an entire summer decorating. We had routines. Saturday morning farmers markets. Sunday long walks with no destination. Thursday dinners where we tried a new recipe. We had a shared playlist on the music app that we'd been adding to for 6 years. We had in-jokes that still made us smile. But somewhere in the middle of all of that, between the comfort and the rhythm and the ease of knowing each other so completely, something had gone quiet. Not absent, just quiet, like a song playing in another room. You know it's there, but you can't quite make out the words. She didn't yell at me that evening. She didn't list grievances or present evidence or give me a timeline of moments where things went wrong. She just sat at the table and told me the truth the way you tell someone their sweater has a loose thread. Gently, like it's something fixable, not a verdict. "I love you," she said. "That's the part that isn't complicated." "Okay," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. But loving someone and feeling truly alive with them, those aren't always the same thing. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. The rain kept falling outside. "Are you telling me you want to leave?" I asked. She took a slow breath. "I'm telling you that I don't feel like I'm fully living. And I think you might not be either. I think we've been so focused on not disrupting what we have that we forgot to ask whether what we have is still what we want." That sentence hit differently than everything else. Because she wasn't just talking about us. She was talking about me. And the part of me that was honest, the part one didn't show very often, knew she wasn't wrong. I had been at the same company for 7 years. I was good at my job. Senior project lead for an infrastructure consulting firm. I delivered. I met deadlines. I managed teams without drama. My boss respected me enough to give me the comfortable projects, the reliable clients, the work that didn't require risk. Because I had never asked for more than that. Because somewhere in the last few years I had confused stability with contentment. And now I was sitting across from my wife who had just named the thing neither of us had said out loud in months. And I was realizing that she hadn't only described our marriage. She had described me. "You're right," I said. She blinked. That she hadn't expected. "I said you're right," I repeated. "About both of us. About me." She looked at me for a long moment. "I didn't say that to hurt you. I know. I said it because I'm tired of pretending things are fine when they're just comfortable," I finished. She nodded. We sat there with that word between us. Comfortable. What a devastating thing for a marriage to become. Not broken. Not loveless. Just comfortable. Like an old chair you keep because it still holds you, not because it inspires anything. That night, I didn't sleep well. I lay on my side of the bed, our side of the bed, which had quietly become my side and her side at some point without either of us announcing it. And I stared at the ceiling. I tried to trace back to the last time I had felt genuinely excited about something. Not satisfied, not relieved, excited, and I had to go back a long time to find it. The year before the pandemic, when we'd spent 3 weeks in Portugal, standing on a cliff edge at sunset, watching the Atlantic spread out below us, and feeling so fully present in that moment that I forgot every single thing I had been worried about that week. That was the last time I could remember feeling it. That was a long time ago. Claire wasn't asleep either. I could tell by her breathing. But neither of us spoke. We just lay there in the dark, two people who loved each other, on opposite edges of a mattress that had started to feel like a border. The email had been sitting in my inbox for 3 weeks. I hadn't opened it. Not because I didn't know what it said. I knew exactly what it said. My company had been contracted for a large infrastructure expansion project in Singapore. It was a significant project. Multi-year scope, high visibility, complex coordination across multiple international teams. The kind of project that could define a career, or derail one, if it went wrong. My director had sent me a direct note asking if I'd be interested in leading it. I had read the first 2 lines, and then closed the email and convinced myself I was too settled, too established here, too invested in what I had built to start over somewhere else. Too comfortable. I opened the email the next morning. I read it fully this time. Then I walked to my director's office and said yes. I told Claire that evening. I didn't frame it as a response to our conversation. I didn't make it dramatic. I just told her that the Singapore project had come up, that I'd been sitting on the offer, and that I wanted to take it. She was quiet for a moment. How long? She asked. The initial contract is 7 months. Could extend to a year. She nodded slowly. Is this because of what I said last night? I thought about that. It's because of what you said last night, and because it's the right call, and because I've been turning it down inside my head for 3 weeks for reasons that have nothing to do with the job and everything to do with fear. She looked at me differently then. Something shifted in her expression. Not warmth exactly. Recognition, maybe. When do you leave? She asked. End of the month. She picked up her tea from the counter and walked toward the hallway. She paused at the doorway. I'm not asking you not to go, she said. I know. I think, she stopped. Started again. I think maybe we both need some room to figure out what we actually want. Yeah, I said. That's scary, she said. Yeah, I said again. But maybe that's how you know it's real. And she went down the hallway, and I stood in the kitchen for a long time after. The weeks before I left were strange. Not cold. Not hostile. Just careful. We were kind to each other the way people are kind when they're aware that things are fragile. We had dinner together most nights. We talked about regular things, a documentary she'd watched, a conversation I'd had with a colleague, the leak under the bathroom sink that we kept meaning to call someone about. Normal things. But underneath all of it was this awareness. This shared understanding that something had shifted, that we were both standing at the edge of something without knowing which direction we were going to walk. Her sister called her one afternoon, and I heard Claire in the bedroom saying she was fine, that things were fine. We were just figuring some things out. I didn't ask her about it later. Some conversations don't need to be held by both people at the same time. My colleague Victor had been based in Singapore for 2 years already. He'd been part of the preliminary groundwork for the project and was going to be my primary point of contact on the ground. He texted me the week before I flew out. You're going to be either miserable or completely renewed by this place. No in between. I wrote back. Helpful. Thanks. He sent a laughing emoji. Then, seriously though, when people come out here alone, one of 2 things happens. They either collapse inward or they expand. Depends on what you do with the silence. I thought about that for a few days. I thought about it when I was folding clothes into a suitcase. I thought about it when Claire sat on the edge of the bed and watched me pack and didn't say anything. I thought about it when she handed me my charger that I'd almost forgotten on the bedside table, and our hands touched for a moment and neither of us pulled away quickly. Take care of yourself, she said. Not I'll miss you. Not this isn't goodbye. Just take care of yourself. Which was, in its own way, the most honest thing she could have said. Singapore hit me immediately. Not the heat. Although the heat was real and relentless in a way that rewired how I thought about weather entirely. But the energy. The city had a pace to it that felt almost architectural, like the urgency was built into the streets themselves. I checked into a service department in the Tanjong Pagar district. 31st floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread out below me like something from a film I hadn't seen yet. I stood at those windows for a long time the first night. I ordered food I didn't recognize from a delivery app. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch because I hadn't figured out how to adjust it yet. And I ate alone in a city I didn't know, in an apartment that smelled like someone else's choices, and instead of feeling lonely, which is what I expected, I felt something closer to relief. Like I had been holding my breath for 2 years and had finally let it go. The project kicked off with a full-day briefing that left me both energized and aware of exactly how much I had taken on. The scope was significant. We were advising on the infrastructure rollout for a district-level urban development initiative. Multiple stakeholders, shifting government timelines, contractors across 4 different countries, and a budget that had 2 kinds of oversight, the kind that helped and the kind that got in the way. I loved it immediately. I loved the complexity. I loved the fact that there was no playbook, that every day was a problem I hadn't solved before. Victor introduced me to the core team on day 2. There was a woman on the compliance side named Adele who had worked in infrastructure law across Southeast Asia for a decade and had opinions about everything and was almost always right. There was a structural engineer named Ben who communicated entirely in diagrams and rarely used more than 6 words in any sentence, but whose 6 words were always exactly the right ones. There was a local project coordinator named Wei Ling who knew every regulatory shortcut, every potential bureaucratic obstacle, every person whose signature would make or break a timeline. These were not people who were comfortable. These were people who were alive. And for the first time in a long time, I felt myself come alive alongside them. Claire and I had agreed to minimal contact. Not no contact, but not scheduled calls either. We'd text when we had something to say. We'd call when a text wouldn't cover it. We gave each other room. And at first, that room was uncomfortable in the way that silence is uncomfortable when you're used to noise. Then it became something else. It became space. Space to think. Space to not perform okayness. Space to actually sit with what I was feeling instead of narrating it for someone else's comfort. She texted me after I'd been there 2 weeks. How is it? I thought about what to say. Harder than I expected. Better than I expected. She replied after a few minutes. That's interesting. I asked, what are you up to? I signed up for a ceramics class. Starting next week. Turns out I've been meaning to do this for 4 years. I stared at that message for a moment. That's great, I said. I know, right? For years. Why do we wait so long for things? I didn't answer that one. Because the answer was too long for a text message. Month 2 was when the project got difficult. A key government timeline shifted by 6 weeks, which created a cascade effect across 3 of our contractor agreements. One of the contracted vendors, a firm out of Malaysia, started making noise about force majeure clauses that they were absolutely not entitled to invoke. It was the kind of problem that required 17 consecutive hours of calls, documentation review, and negotiation that had to be conducted with complete precision. I didn't sleep for most of those days. I ate whatever was nearest. I lived inside the problem the way I hadn't lived inside anything in years. And when we came out the other side of it, when the timeline was renegotiated, the vendor was brought to heel, and the project got back on track, I sat in the office at midnight and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Proud. Not relieved. Not grateful nothing had gone worse. Genuinely proud. Victor brought 2 bottles of beer from somewhere and set one on the desk in front of me without asking. You didn't panic, he said. I panicked internally, I said. Sure, but you didn't show it. That's just management. No, he said, taking a drink. That's knowing who you are when things fall apart. Not everyone knows that. I picked up the bottle. I didn't used to know it either, I said. He looked at me sideways. What changed? I thought about Claire sitting at the dining table. The rainy window. The cold mug. Someone told me the truth, I said. He didn't ask anything else. We drank our beers in the empty office and watched the city lights below. There's a thing that happens when you remove yourself from your own life for long enough. You start seeing it from the outside. You start seeing it the way a stranger might. I had spent 8 years being a good husband in the conventional sense of the phrase. I showed up. I was consistent. I remembered anniversaries. I listened when she talked. I never lied to her about anything important. But I had stopped reaching for her. Not physically. That was still there, in its diminished way. But in the sense of actively pursuing her. Actively choosing her every day the way I had in the first 2 years. That energy, that intent, I had let it settle into assumption. I had assumed that because she was still there, she was still there. And she was. But she had been watching the distance grow the same way I had. And the difference between us was that she said something about it, and I had been in the process of learning to live with it. I wrote some of this in a journal I'd started keeping in the 2nd month. Not for anyone else. Just to think more clearly than I could in my own head. She called me on a Sunday evening in month 3. I was standing on my balcony with leftover noodles and my laptop opened to nothing important. Her face appeared on the screen, and something in my chest moved. Not toward pain, just moved. She looked different. A good different. Her hair was tied up messily. There was something on her shirt that looked like dried clay. She was glowing slightly with the particular energy of someone who had just finished doing something with their hands. Ceramics, I guessed. She laughed. Can you tell? The clay disaster situation on your shirt, yeah. She looked down. I made a bowl today. Well, the instructor said it was a bowl. I thought it looked more like an ashtray that had given up on life. I laughed. Actually laughed. The kind that comes from your chest without being engineered. How's the project? She asked. I told her about the vendor situation. She listened the way she used to listen. Fully. Not waiting for her turn to speak. Actually following the thread. When I finished, she said, that sounds like exactly the kind of problem that's horrible while it's happening and makes a great story afterward. That's accurate, I said. There was a small silence. The comfortable kind. The kind we used to have. Are you okay? She asked. Better than I was, I said. She nodded slowly. Me too, she said. And we stayed on the call for another 40 minutes talking about nothing critical. Her sister's new apartment. A series she'd started watching. A conversation she'd had with someone at the ceramics class who'd said something unexpectedly profound. We talked like people who still knew each other. Because we did. We just needed space to remember it. Month 4. The project had found its rhythm. The team had developed the kind of shorthand that only comes from surviving a crisis together. I had found a coffee shop near the office that I went to every morning before anyone else arrived. I had started running in the evenings along the waterfront. I had started sleeping well. Actually sleeping. Not collapsing into unconsciousness and waking up still tired. Actually sleeping. I had dinner with Victor and his wife one weekend. Her name was Priya. She was an architect. She was sharp and funny and completely unintimidated by anyone. After dinner, when Victor went to get the car, she and I stood outside for a moment. Victor says you're going through something, she said. Direct. No preamble. Something like what? I asked. Marriage stuff. I exhaled slowly. He shouldn't have said that. He didn't say details. Just that you're figuring things out while you're here. That's fair. She looked at the street. Can I say something unsolicited? You're going to regardless, I can tell. She smiled. People change. The mistake isn't changing. The mistake is expecting the person you were 5 years ago to keep sustaining the relationship that the person you are now needs. You both have to change together, or you have to be honest about the fact that you've grown in different directions. I thought about that. What if you're not sure which one it is? I asked. Then you're not done finding out yet, she said simply. The car pulled up. She patted my arm once and got in. In month 5, I found a letter in my bag. Not a letter I knew about. I had been reaching for my passport at the bottom of the bag when my fingers touched paper. Folded twice. Small. I pulled it out. I recognized her handwriting. She had slipped it in before I left. 5 months ago. I had no idea. I sat down on the floor of my apartment. I still preferred the floor sometimes. It had become a thing, and I opened it. It said, I don't know how to say everything I need to say right now. So I'm writing it down so you can have it later when you're ready. I want you to know that when I said what I said about comfort and passion, I wasn't saying I'd stopped loving you. I was saying I'd stopped being brave enough to ask for more. And I don't think you had either. And I thought if I said it out loud, one of us would finally do something. I'm not sure what I want to happen, but I know I want both of us to figure out who we actually are, separate from this thing we've built together. Because I think we built it so fast and held it so tightly that we forgot to keep building ourselves. I put this in your bag because I knew I'd lose my nerve in person. I don't know when you'll find it. I hope it's when you need it. You're going to be great out there. I know it. See, I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it back exactly the way it had been. And I sat there on the floor of my 31st floor apartment while the city went about its evening below me, and I thought about the woman who had written that note, who had been brave enough to say the true thing at the dining table, who had signed up for ceramics because she'd been waiting for years, who had slipped a letter into my bag and let me find it when I was ready. And I thought about the man I had been before I got on that plane, who had turned down this project 3 times in his own head, who had been so careful about not disrupting what he had that he'd forgotten to actually live inside it. I called her. Not texted. Called. She picked up on the third ring. Hey, she said. She sounded slightly out of breath, like she'd run for the phone. I found the letter, I said. Silence. Then, oh, in the bag. Just now. I've been carrying it around for 5 months. Another silence. The kind that isn't empty. Are you mad? She asked quietly. No, I said. Why didn't you just give it to me? Because you would have responded to it in the moment, and the moment was wrong, she said. I wanted you to have it when you were somewhere else. When you had distance. That's very calculated for someone who claims not to know what she wants. She was quiet for a second. Then she laughed. Soft. A little surprised. You sound different, she said. I am different, I said. Good different. I think so. I'm less afraid of things being hard. She was quiet again, but it was a warm quiet. I'm less afraid of asking for things, she said. The ceramics. And other things. Like what? She paused. Like I want to come visit, she said. I went still. Visit Singapore? Visit you. Visit the city. I've been looking at flights. I know the project is still running, and I'm not asking to disrupt anything. She stopped. I'm curious. That word. Curious. Not I miss you as a demand. Not I need to know if we're okay as an ultimatum. Curious. When were you thinking? I asked. I was looking at the 3rd week of November. That was 6 weeks away. That works, I said. Yeah. Another pause. This is weird, she said. I know. But it's the good kind of weird. Yeah, I said. It is. The next 6 weeks were different from the months before them. Not because we talked more. We actually talked about the same amount. But there was something that had shifted in the texture of it. Like before, there had been this careful quality to everything. Measured. Safe. Now there was something else. Something that felt like anticipation. She sent me photos of her ceramics class progress. The first ones were genuinely terrible in an endearing way, misshapen, uneven, gravity-challenged. By week 4, she sent me a photo of a mug she'd made. Actually usable. Properly proportioned. She'd glazed it in a dark blue with a thin stripe of something gold near the rim. It was really good. I made something, she texted beneath the photo. Yeah, you did, I wrote back. It took me 4 years to walk into that class, and now I can't imagine not going. What stopped you for 4 years? She thought about it for a moment. Honestly, I was afraid it would just confirm that I wasn't good at anything outside of what we'd already built. That landed. Because I understood it completely. The way comfort becomes a cage without meaning to. The way you stop trying new things because the known things are safe and failing at something new feels like too much evidence of something you don't want to confirm. You were wrong, I wrote. I know, she said. About most of it, I said. She sent back a laughing face. Then, I know that too. November arrived. The project was in its most stable phase. We were past the crisis months. The work was now methodical, technical, detailed. The kind of work that didn't require me to be the one in the room. I had built a team that didn't need me to hold their hands through every decision. Which was the goal. Which was also, quietly, a measure of how much I'd grown in 7 months. I picked her up from the airport myself. Didn't send a car, didn't ask Victor to help coordinate. I drove to Changi at 7 in the morning and waited at arrivals with a coffee for her because I still remembered how she took it. She came through the doors looking slightly rumpled from the flight. Carry-on bag over one shoulder. Her hair down. She scanned the crowd and found me, and something crossed her face. Not quite a smile yet. Something quieter. Something that took a breath before it became anything. She walked toward me. I handed her the coffee. She took it. You remembered the oat milk, she said. Of course. She looked at me for a moment. You look different, she said. Everyone keeps saying that. It's true. You look like, she searched for the word. Like you're not managing yourself. Is that good? It means you look real, she said. Like you're not trying to hold everything in a particular shape. I took her bag from her. Come on, I said. I'll show you the city. We spent 4 days together. I want to be clear. It wasn't a reconciliation trip. It wasn't a romantic reset with a bow on it. It was 2 people who had known each other for a decade rediscovering whether they actually liked who the other one had become. That's a different thing. And it's harder, because you can't just coast on history. You have to be present. Actually present. I showed her the coffee shop I went to every morning. She loved it immediately. The owner, an older man who communicated primarily through eyebrow movements and coffee quality, gave her the same nod he gave me, which she found disproportionately delightful. I took her to the waterfront where I ran in the evenings. We walked instead of ran. We talked. Properly talked. The way we hadn't in years. Not about logistics or schedules or the practical business of a shared life. About things we believed. About things we were afraid of. About what we thought the next 10 years could look like if we were honest about what we actually wanted rather than what we'd already decided we were. She told me things. Things she'd been sitting with. That she'd felt invisible not because I had ignored her, but because I had stopped seeing her as someone who was still growing. That she'd felt like I'd decided who she was and stopped asking questions. that it was lonely, being known so completely and still feeling unseen. I didn't defend myself, because it wasn't an accusation. It was information. It was the map of what I had missed. I told her things too, that I had mistaken stability for meaning, that I had been so focused on building a life that didn't collapse that I had forgotten to build one that was worth anything. That when she said what she said on that rainy evening, the part of me that was honest knew she was right about all of it, and I had been terrified of what the right response would require. That choosing this project, getting on that plane, building something difficult in a city where no one knew me. It had cost me something, and given me something back in return. She listened to all of it. "Are you still afraid?" she asked. "Of different things," I said. "Like what?" "Of going back to who I was. Of slipping back into the comfort without the passion. Of waking up in 5 years and realizing I'd just done it again." She nodded slowly. "That's what I'm afraid of too," she said. "So what do we do with that?" I asked. She looked out at the water. "I think we stop pretending we don't know what we need and start actually asking for it. From ourselves and from each other." On her last evening, we sat on the balcony of my apartment. The city below us was lit up the way cities are at night when they look like something out of a painting. She had a glass of wine. I had my tea. We weren't talking, just sitting. And it was different from the silences we'd had in the months before I left. Those silences had been heavy with unsaid things. This one was quiet the way a room is quiet when everything important has already been said. "I want to try again," she said. Not dramatically, not as a pivot to an emotional scene. Just said it. The way you say something you've decided with your whole self. "I want to try again," I said. "But differently," she said. "Very differently," I agreed. "I mean it. Not back to what we had." "No," I said. "What we had was finished." "That's okay. Something new," she said. "Two people who've been through something and came back on purpose," I said. She looked at me. "That's actually a nice way to say it. I've had 7 months of practice thinking in sentences." She smiled. Real. The one that reaches her eyes. The one I had fallen in love with on a rooftop at a birthday party in our late 20s. It was still there, changed by time and truth, and the particular where of a life lived honestly. But there. She left the next morning. I drove her back to the airport. We didn't make promises we couldn't keep. We didn't try to solve everything at the departure gate. She hugged me, and this time I didn't pull away quickly. I held on. Not desperately. Not like someone afraid of losing something. Like someone choosing something. "Come home when the project is done," she said. "I will. I'll be different when you do. I'm counting on it," I said. She laughed, picked up her carry-on, walked toward security, paused once and looked back, waved, and then she was gone into the crowd, and I stood there in the airport and felt something that was distinct and specific, and I want to be exact about what it was. It wasn't certainty. It was better than certainty. It was intention. The difference between knowing what will happen and deciding what to build. I finished the project the first week of February. The final handover was a 2-day affair. Presentations, documentation transfers, government sign-offs, a dinner with the senior stakeholders where everyone said the right things, and some of them even meant them. Victor and I had a drink at a bar near the office on the last night. He was staying. "Another project, different scope. You're different than when you got here," he said. "So you keep telling me." "It's a compliment." "I know. What are you going back to?" he asked. I thought about it. "Something I'm building," I said. He clinked his glass against mine. "That's the right answer," he said. I flew home on a Thursday. She met me at the airport, not in arrivals. She texted me when she was outside. I came out with my 2 bags. I had acquired things in 7 months, a person does, and found her leaning against her car in the late afternoon light. She was wearing a coat I hadn't seen before. Her hair was shorter. She looked like herself, but a version of herself that had been through something and come out the other side, and wasn't pretending it had been easy. She looked, to be specific, like someone who had made a bowl in a ceramics class and held it up and thought, "I made something." I walked toward her. She pushed off the car. We met in the middle. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said. She looked at me for a moment. "New jacket," she said. "Singapore had good shopping." "I can tell." "New haircut." I said. "February impulse." "It's good." "I know," she said, smiling. And that was it. No grand speech. No tearful reunion scene from a film. Just 2 people who had told each other the truth, taken the space they needed, changed in the ways they needed to change, and come back on purpose. She took one of my bags. I put the other in the back seat. We got in the car. She started driving. The city came back to me as she drove. The streets I knew, the turns I'd taken 10,000 times, the lights in the distance that had been there my whole adult life. It looked different, not because it had changed, because I had. I started working on a new proposal, she said as she drove. For what? There's a design studio that does some training programs. I submitted a pitch for a series of ceramics-based workshops for adults. Corporate wellness angle. I stared at her. You're serious? I've been thinking about it for 2 months. I talked to the ceramics instructor. She's interested. She knows some contacts. Claire, I know it might not work, but I want to try it. I think that's incredible, I said. She glanced at me. You're not going to say it's risky? It's risky, I said. Try it anyway. She smiled at the road. You really are different. Very. Good different, she said. You said that before, I said. I mean it more now. We are not the same couple we were. And I think that's the thing I want to say most. If you're reading this and you're in something that has gotten quiet, not broken, not bad, just quietly insufficient, I want to say this. Quiet isn't a verdict. Quiet is a question. And the answer to that question isn't always space in a suitcase and a project in another country. For us it was. But the shape of the answer isn't what matters. What matters is whether you're willing to ask the question honestly. Whether you can sit with your partner on a rainy evening and say the true thing. Whether you can hear the true thing without making it someone's fault. Whether you can take the space, do the work, not perform the version of yourself that you think the story requires, but actually go somewhere quiet and find out who you are when you stop managing yourself into a shape. She found ceramics. I found a project that scared me. We found ourselves, separately, and then we came back and started finding each other again. It's not finished. It's not supposed to be. That's the thing about building something. It's never finished. You just keep working on it. You just keep showing up with intention. You just keep choosing it every day, not because the alternative is too scary, but because this is what you actually want. Comfortable is fine for furniture. For a marriage, you want something better. You want something that still asks things of you. Something that still surprises you. Something that you still have to be brave to reach for. She walked in last Tuesday with Qley on her hands again, holding up a new piece. A small picture this time. Uneven and slightly crooked and glazed in a color she couldn't quite name. What do you think? She asked. I looked at it for a moment. I think it's the best thing you've made, I said. She set it on the counter. Looked at it. Looked at me. Yeah, she said. I think so too.